Welcome to this episode in the series, the discussion series of parental estrangement. My name is LaShawn Wilburn, and I support moms who are navigating parental estrangement, who may be empty nesters, and on their second phase of life by supporting you through your accountability, your healing, your self care, and a commitment to lifelong learning. This week in our discussion series, we're covering how adult children can wind up in very abusive relationships and it can cause estrangement. Those abusive relationships don't have to only be with a significant other or a love interest that they're in a relationship with. It can also happen with friendships, new friendships. Um, Last week, I discussed with you how internalized toxic masculinity can impact your parenting and could play a part in parental estrangement and how you raised your children and maybe being influenced by toxic masculinity and how you set standards for maybe your sons and daughters and how you parented them. And I mentioned last week also how parenting from our wounds, even though we are feeling that we have managed to not repeat the same parenting that happened for us when we were children, right? And so if you'd like to see or learn more about that, it's in the video before this one, okay? But tonight, I wanted to talk to you about um, parental estrangement of a different kind, and that is when an adult child winds up in an abusive relationship, whether that be a friendship or an intimate partner. It can impact the relationship you have with your adult child. And sometimes parents don't understand. They just know that all of a sudden they didn't hear anything else from their adult child. There was no reason why. There was just a disappearing. And so sometimes that happens as a result of an adult child falling into a relationship where there's either physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse. And so I think it's important that we talk about these things because parents seem like the last to know most times. There's not this big explosion or a huge fight or argument that happens. There's just a gradual process where the adult child starts to withdraw and then eventually cuts off all contact with their parents or parent, okay? I want to use as an example when an adult child gets into a relationship with an intimate partner. Now, I try to keep them separate, but I see this happen often in the world of caregiving, especially for parents who may be caregiving for those with developmental disabilities, loved ones who may have a mental health diagnosis. And as much as, stigma would dictate that or would try to convince you that persons with mental health diagnoses are actually a threat to others, more often than not, they are taken advantage of and they are easy prey for people who are looking to manipulate and control and exploit someone, okay? And so, as I mentioned, when I said I tried to keep it separate, I also have a nonprofit for mental health family caregivers in which I support caregivers and who are supporting loved ones living with a mental health diagnosis. So, in that situation, it's easy to have an adult child wind up in a relationship with someone who could cause them harm, okay? And they can start with, talking them against their family, Your family is in your business too much, and you don't need to tell your family what we're going or what we're doing. And, it starts very lightly, like, um, oh, well, I want to show some pictures to my parents about where we went. Oh, well, you don't have to do that. I don't do that with my family, or I don't do that with my parents, and it's fine. You're grown and you're acting like a child, and you don't have to do that, right? And when there's a healthy family dynamic where everyone's, used to sharing their life experiences, going on vacation and sending back pictures or videos, or going live on their, FaceTime or Messenger or what have you, and saying, hey, look at this neat thing I found, or this beautiful place. And it starts off by limiting the amount of communication that an adult child has with their family. And initially, the adult child may not say anything to the parent, right? Or the parent may get a warning from the adult child that I'm a little concerned that so and so is acting really strange, and they don't like when I call and talk with you guys, or they don't like when you call or talk to me. So I'll just call you after they leave, or something. You start noticing little things that kind of give you a indicator that there's some trouble that they're having with their new relationship with the person manipulating and attempting to estrange them from their family, or to create a gap between the adult child and their family, right? And so this happens a lot in domestic violence situations as well, where there is the need for the new mate to create a vacuum for the adult child, where they're the solution, they're both the problem and the solution, right? And so they start creating issues and making up stories about what they believe is happening versus what's actually happening. And I shared on one of my accounts, my Twitter account, how a lot of times we can raise our children to be very family centered, to take care of their families, to be loyal, to be there for their friends and not to let them down, and to, build great relationships, and, like I said, take care of their families and provide and work and right. And sometimes that's, exploited by people who don't mean well, and by people who can have an ill intent towards your children, right? And, it's a very difficult place to be in as a parent, because to find out that there is a form of abuse happening and the adult child either says it to you, I'm concerned that they don't want me to talk with you guys, or they get angry and slam things, or they refuse to go out if we've said we're going out, or if we're out and I mention or I send you guys something or a video and say, hey, look at where we are, then they get angry and they want to go home. Manipulation, where it gets to a point where there's a penalty to pay for having contact with the family, right? And so that sounds like it's far-fetched, but when you're in that situation as a parent of an adult child and you see these things happening, it's a very disturbing situation to have to observe and to try and be there for your adult child, all the while not encouraging or trying to, make decisions for them about their life and who should be in their lives, and if this person is a good person or not for them, right? We don't want to do that. That we don't want to impose what we believe is good and bad for them. That's their decision. They're an adult, right? And so parents may feel like, I can't really say anything. I don't want to say anything because what if I'm wrong? Or you may just have an idea that something's different, right? Because you start noticing that your child is a little more nervous when they come to family gatherings, or they're nervous when they're on the phone with you and they have to get off the phone as soon as their love interest starts talking in the background, or it's just different things that parents can start to pick up, key um, behaviors that are starting to shift, right? And another instance, and I saw this on TikTok about, I'd say about 2 months ago, there was a woman on there and she was talking about her um, boyfriend's mom and dad, and that she didn't want them around her child. And our family dealt with that before. And that's a very harmful and painful experience to have when a love interest or a mate of an adult child decides that they don't want to let your adult child allow you to see your grandchildren or to talk with you without pushback from them or punishment. And so for us, that was very difficult. And not understanding what was happening or why there was, this belief system that the children weren't in a good place if they were to visit us. And so, you know, those are the things that are manipulation, and they lead to isolating, and as I said, creating a vacuum for the adult child to live in, right? Because then if they are in contact with their parents and the person has no goodwill and no good intent, then they don't, when there's manipulation and exploitation, they want as few people as possible to be there to have privy or to see what's going on, right? Or to alert the adult child to what's happening or what's going on. And a lot of times they know, a lot of times they'll share with family or friends what they believe is happening and that this is, a concern, but they're afraid, right? Either afraid of the mate leaving them, abandoning them, or afraid of losing contact with their own children, because those threats can be made as a result of if you let them talk to them, or if you, allow them to see them, then I'm going to leave, or I'll keep the baby and you won't be able to see them, right? And so those are ways that, manipulation and exploitation can happen with our adult children. And as I mentioned earlier when I first started, how especially adult children who have mental health diagnosis, that can create a problem because sometimes they can be easily exploited, and they can take advantage of them, and oh well, can you buy me this, or can you take me there, or can you send me some money, or it's easier to take advantage of people when you isolate them, when you create conflict between them and their family. Then you can control them, and that's what they are, in the mindset of doing. I shared in the, I can't remember how far back it was, but I've shared my experience with being in an abusive relationship and having domestic violence and being isolated from my family and being told, they don't need to know our business, and you don't have to call them every time you're excited about something. And I don't do that with my family. And that's another thing I wanted to bring up, because I think about some instances in my relationship with my ex, in which I experienced lots of programming, if you will, from members of their family, right? There was an instance where there was an uncle of my ex-husband who, wanted to have a meeting with he and I and talk with us and explain to me why it was important for me that, using the Bible actually, and that a man would leave his mother and father and take on his wife, and the two will become one, and that you don't need your family anymore. This is your family. He's your only family you need to be concerned with, and that's all there is. And it was more about, oh, well, we are your family now, right? And so you don't need them to be in your family. Well, later on, I would find out that he was also the person behind a lot of the violence in our marriage, and saying that you need to beat her. You need to, it was just a lot of manipulation and exploitation. And so there's no shortage sometimes when our adult children wind up in these relationships. There's no shortage of people who are probably willing and enabling. And I don't know what you call them. There's probably some term that's used for that when there's someone who's there to co-sign on what the person who's being the exploiter and causing the abuse, right? To help to convince that your adult child that this is, oh yeah, this is normal. You don't have to talk to your family. This is just us. And then there's the manipulation happening for our adult child who's going through that. And they are getting, these messages that are ill-intended, right? And helping the person who's exploiting them, right? The person who is manipulating them. It's their cosign. Oh yeah, what that person is telling you is the truth. That you need to let go. Your parents need to leave you alone because you're grown. And all the while, their family has a lot of input and a lot of decisions are made from that side of the relationship, right? And that can happen with mother-in-laws, that can happen with uncles, grandparents, who all want to, be a part of or of benefit to that exploitation. I can tell you an example of a caregiver who had a loved one who had not just a developmental disorder, but also had a mental health diagnosis, and that they became the mate and the adult child had a child together. And the parents were immigrants and decided that they wanted to have the adult child work in their business. And as soon as the adult child was separated from their family, they were forced, not, I guess you can't say forced, but convinced to work for free for the other family, right? And they weren't allowed to make decisions about where their money was spent, and that the other mate was only allowed to make that decision about where the money was spent, right? And so I remember talking to the caregiver about it and how we had similar experiences with one of our adult children, and how painful it was and how difficult it is to see the manipulation happening and to want to say something, or in our instance where we did say something and then it is turned around and made to seem as if there was meddling by the parent, by us as the parents, right? And so that's just a very difficult situation to be in. And we want to be mindful and careful that we aren't that parent, right? And that we aren't the reason why our child has estranged from us, because we may have created a situation where we want to remain in control and not allow our adult child to branch out, meet other people, have a healthy and functional adult relationship outside of their relationship with their family. There are also mothers and fathers who are very controlling, and they want to decide who their adult child has a relationship with, who they're having children with. They want to make these decisions as if it's an extension of their body, right? And so we need to be mindful of that if that's who we are as the parent, right? Because that can cause estrangement as well, right? And so in this discussion series about parental estrangements and the many different ways in which you can wind up in estrangement with your adult child, or, just there's a plethora of ways in which an adult child can become estranged from their parents or family, right? When you look at the exploitation that happens for some people with friends, there's a rise in what they call, I'm trying to remember the name for it. Um, I forget what it's called, but it's when someone decides that they are going to um, exploit a person, and they set out to, identity theft, to get access to their intimate spaces, to information so that they'll be able to use it to gain their money or to gain, as I mentioned, their identity, or steal or do things that are not, um, that can be harmful. Okay. And that there's a rise in that as we see people with video cameras on. I mean, there's no shortage of craziness that happens when you're seeing things online. And not to bring up something very painful and ugly, but I think back to the baby who was out of Chicago, and she was with friends, and they were all going to a party, and it had been decided earlier on that there was a young man that had arranged with the young woman that was to bring her to the party, that he wanted to meet her, and she didn't want to meet him, and she had been avoiding him or turning him down or something, and he wanted her to bring her to a party that they were having at a hotel. And as we all know, that did not end well. The young woman lost her life, and I haven't heard much about where they are in studying, and the investigation with the young woman that happened with. And so there's just a lot of lack of respect for people who are, kind and generous and trusting. And that can happen sometimes when we raise our children to be kind and generous and trusting, and that people take advantage of that and they use it to their benefit and to gain the things that they'd like to have, whether it's access to their money and their, car, their home. It's access to social status, to, in instances where there are people who are social influencers, we see so much betrayal and what have you that happens with that. And a lot of that happens as a result of them isolating an individual from their family, from their friends who could alert them to, hey, there's something a little off about so and so, or are you sure you want to do that? That sounds a little, shady, or, what have you. They want to isolate and keep them separate from their families, and they're willing to do so at whatever cost to the adult child, without regard for the destruction of their relationships and their finances or what have you, right? And so I've seen this even in the comments over on TikTok, where I get a lot of interaction from other parents who are enduring parental estrangement and saying, before my son got married, before my daughter got married, before they met this new person, before they started hanging out with this person or that person, things were fine. And then there was all of a sudden a change, right? And it's very painful when that happens, because many of us didn't raise our children to not be good people, right? You don't raise your children to go out into the world and cause harm and to be exploitive and manipulate and take things from people because they trust them and they are having faith in them. And to have that happen to an adult child, and then to have it happen, have parental estrangement happen as a result of that, is doubly painful, because you worry about the safety of your child, right? You worry about the safety of grandchildren if there are grandchildren involved. There was what do you call that, on Facebook. I came across a story on Facebook about 2 weeks back, where there was a story about a man who took custody of his daughter from the mom of the daughter, and he remarried a woman who didn't have children, and um, there were instances where his daughter had bruises on her, and he didn't know what was going on, and it was kept saying the new girlfriend kept saying, "Oh, well, she fell," or what have you. And so the daughter, I think, had been given back to the mother or given to a grandmother. And then he married the girlfriend. And then he wound up getting custody of the daughter back again. And the girlfriend had a baby. And then after she had the baby, he was leaving the daughter in her care. And the daughter was losing a lot of weight. And he didn't know what was going on. He was concerned, and the girlfriend was saying that the daughter was eating regularly and was, nothing was wrong, and she didn't see a reason why she was losing weight. And I think it was said that she went to school and there were rumors of bruises on her, and the girlfriend or the new wife didn't understand or didn't know anything about why that was happening. Long story short, they had another baby, and these weird things happening with his daughter where she was losing weight, and getting calls from the girlfriend saying that she wouldn't eat and that she was losing weight and that she wasn't feeling well, and she wasn't sure that the daughter was doing well, and that maybe he should come and check on her. And eventually the daughter wound up succumbing to whatever the new wife was doing. And the husband and her went, and it was very brutal, this story, but they didn't report that she had passed away. And they did some things trying to um, dispose of the baby. And police were, the young man, well, not the young man, the man finally talked to a family relative, a best friend or uncle, I can't remember, but it was another male person in his family or friend circle that he spoke to about it, and they convinced him to go to the police to talk about it. And he did, and they found out that he had the baby in his car all that time, and that he had been covering up for the then new wife about how the baby had succumbed to whatever abuses there were. And so you think about that, and it's, people say, well, I don't understand how that can happen, right? But you would be surprised how manipulative and how abusive emotionally and mentally that sometimes people can be. And when we have children adult children who may be easily swayed, or as I mentioned, may have developmental disabilities, may have a diagnosis as far as a mental health diagnosis. Sometimes there are judgment challenges that come with that, and being easily manipulated is one of them. And it's one of the reasons why we have here in Texas the Department of Aging and Disability, where that can be reported, right? Because even, though it can happen outside the family, it can happen within the family as well. I've been a case manager for people who have been exploited and manipulated by their own parents because they are, developmentally disabled, right? And they're able to take care of themselves, and they're able to work, and they know the difference between, they know how to count their money and how to get their change back and how to pay their bills and everything. And then the parents make it a priority of their own to try and prove that they're not capable of of living on their own and taking care of their own bills. And why? So that they can continue to get the money for that child, or be um, I think it's not the payee, but it's like the caregiver, that they are given authority over handling the financial affairs of their adult children. And so that can happen too, you know. And so I try to be as fair and impartial, um, as as fair and as impartial and as transparent as possible when I share these experiences and these stories that I've heard from other parents or that I've read or seen videos about online, because parental estrangement is a very painful family dynamic, and there are many roads to it. And one of those roads, as we are discussing here today, being when an adult child winds up in an abusive relationship. And it's it's a very difficult space to be in, because there's a separation there, and sometimes that separation happens for up to 10 years. I met a parent about, I think it was about 2 weeks ago online, who's been estranged from her child, her adult child, for 20 years. And it was because they got into a new relationship and cut off everybody. Even her and her spouse were divorced, and their adult child cut off the relationship not just with the mom, but with the father's family and the mother's family, right? And so, you see a lot, I see it all the time online. Um, oh, I don't even let my kids deal with my husband's family, and my husband understands, and he knows that I don't get along with his sister, and I don't get along with his father, or I don't get along with his mother, and he understands why I don't want my kids over there. And, it's one thing to not care for your in-laws, but it's a whole other thing to alienate your spouse from their family because you want control and because you want to create opportunity for you to stay in power and be manipulative and exploitive. And I can't even tell you the amount of pain that happens in families when there is an exploitive, manipulative spouse of an adult child that will use their power and will their power against their own mate and their own children just so they are able to be in control. And what's really sad about it is a lot of times there's conflict in their own family, and then their direct relationships with their parents and their siblings and other members of their family, that they do not assert themselves always, and it's easier to assert themselves in the situations with adult children of their mate, who is would be an adult child of that mate's family or parents. And so I wanted to talk about this openly and honestly, because this is a real issue. And it happens more and more and more. You go to my TikTok account and you just go through the separate videos and read the comments, and you can see the pain and the anguish and the amount of parents that are experiencing this very dynamic that I'm talking about right now. One daughter was moved out of the country away from her family. That's very extreme, because where do you go as a parent? It's like having a child that's alive, but that has it's almost as if they're dead to you, because all contact has been cut off, and 10 and 20 and so on years is a eternity. And so, hoping to shed light on this, hoping to bring some peace and some awareness to these type of family dynamics that happen, and to hopefully let other parents know that they aren't alone when they're facing these type of family dynamics. And it's just a very difficult place to be, and estrangement from your child when you've done nothing wrong, and to have all contact cut off from your child because of a relationship they have or friendship that they have where they're being harmed. And that can be physically, as I mentioned, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So again, thank you so much for coming in and for watching. Again, my name is LaShawn Wilburn. I am the founder of the Matriarch Code for mothers who are navigating parental estrangement. I help you to prioritize your healing, your accountability, your healing, your self-care, and a commitment to lifelong learning, because that is the only way that we are able to grow and expand and to benefit from the things that we've been through, but also benefit from the new knowledge of who we can become if we allow ourselves to, and with awareness and education. So thank you again for being here. I hope you'll come back, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.